What if the cornerstone of the Brown family, a promise of a better future for all 18 children, was nothing more than a private bank account for Kody and his favorite wife, Robyn? For years, we've heard whispers and insider reports about the family's murky finances, but today, we're diving into an explosive theory that, if true, rewrites everything we thought we knew. This is the story of a secret education fund, a sacred pact between a husband and his wives to provide for their children's futures. But according to exclusive sources, this fund became a slush fund, systematically drained of over $150,000. The alleged thieves? Kody and Robyn Brown. The victims? The children of Christine and Janelle, whose dreams of higher education were supposedly sacrificed for new cars, luxury vacations, and high-end toys. This isn't just about favoritism. The allegations point to calculated, deliberate theft. So, if you are ready to uncover the truth that has been hiding in plain sight, you're in the right place. Before we unravel this shocking timeline of deception, do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to COCO Gossip, and ring that notification bell. You are not going to want to miss a single detail of this investigation. Now let's get into it. To understand the magnitude of this alleged betrayal, we have to go back to the beginning, back to the promise of one family. From the very start of their public lives, Kody Brown championed the principle of unity. It was the bedrock of their plural family, the justification for every sacrifice and every struggle. He wasn't just a husband to 4 women, he was the patriarch, the spiritual leader, the CEO of Brown Family Incorporated. And a core tenet of his leadership was the solemn vow that every single one of the 18 children would be treated as his own, with equal love, equal opportunity, and equal provision. This promise was particularly potent when it came to education. We've heard it said that the adults were adamant about their children getting a college education. Kody, a man who has openly admitted his greatest fear is poverty, saw higher education as the ultimate escape route, the golden ticket to a life better than the one he had. He preached it from the pulpit of his family room, instilling in his children the idea that a degree was not a luxury, but a necessity. This wasn't just talk. According to sources close to the family, this promise was solidified into a formal agreement, a joint education fund. This wasn't just a simple savings account. It was a meticulously planned financial vehicle, an investment portfolio designed to grow over time and ensure that when each child reached college age, the funds would be there, ready and waiting. The establishment of this fund was, in itself, a testament to the family's collective spirit. According to these insider reports, each wife was expected to contribute. Janelle, with her sharp business acumen and history as the family's primary breadwinner, was a consistent and significant contributor. She viewed it as a logical, responsible investment in her children's future. Christine, who for years managed the household on a shoestring budget, often taking on side jobs, and even relying on food stamps in the early days, also faithfully contributed what she could. Her contributions were an act of faith. Faith in Kody, faith in the family, and faith in the promise that her children, Aspen, Mykelti, Pedon, Gwendolyn, Isabel, and Truly, would have the same opportunities as everyone else. Mary, too, despite having only one child, Leon, was part of this pact. Her earnings from her various endeavors also fed into this central pot, under the assumption that it was for the benefit of all the Brown children. The fund was more than just money, it was a symbol. It was the physical manifestation of the one family principle. It was proof that, despite living in separate homes and having separate mothers, the children were all part of one tribe, with one patriarch steering the ship. Kody took immense pride in this fund. He would reportedly speak of it often, holding it up as an example of their family's foresight and dedication. It was his answer to the critics, the proof that polygamy wasn't just about a man's desires, but about building a legacy for generations to come. He was providing a pathway to success that he himself never had, ensuring his children would be doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, not struggling salespeople bouncing from one financial crisis to the next. The children grew up hearing about the fund. It was a fixture in family discussions about the future. "When you go to college," was the common refrain, and the unspoken addendum was, "The fund will be there for you." It created a sense of security, a belief that their father had their backs, that the family as a whole was invested in their individual success. This promise, this symbol, this carefully constructed image of paternal provision is what makes the story of its alleged demise so utterly devastating. Because while Janelle and Christine were scrimping and saving, sacrificing their own needs for the sake of this collective dream, a very different narrative was beginning to unfold behind closed doors. The seeds of deception were being sown in the fertile ground of financial secrecy and growing favoritism. The slow burn of this deception began subtly, almost imperceptibly. It started around the time the family dynamics began to shift dramatically with Robyn's entrance. Her arrival didn't just add a fourth wife, it introduced a new center of gravity around which Kody Brown began to orbit. Insiders report that this emotional shift was mirrored by a financial one. From the outset, Robyn's financial needs were treated with a unique urgency. The family famously absorbed her significant debt from her previous marriage, a debt that included Sears, Target, and a now infamous Victoria's Secret catalog bill. This act was framed as a necessary step to unify the family and secure their collective financial future, particularly their ability to qualify for the Las Vegas homes. However, it set a dangerous precedent. While the other wives were expected to be frugal and contribute to the central pot, Robyn's financial history was wiped clean by that very same pot. Kody, who preached financial responsibility, effectively bailed out his new favorite, an act of financial favoritism that did not go unnoticed. Then came the move to Flagstaff, a chaotic and financially ruinous decision that many in the family, including the children, openly questioned. This move, according to reports, was the moment the financial deception kicked into high gear. The purchase of Robyn's massive million-dollar home, a property far more lavish than any of the other wives' rentals, was a significant drain on the family's resources. It was a purchase made possible by the pooled family funds, including the proceeds from the sales of the other wives' Las Vegas homes. Yet, only Kody and Robyn benefited from this level of luxury. Janelle was left bouncing between rentals and eventually a trailer, and Christine was in a home she would eventually have to fight to extract her own equity from. It was during this period of financial strain that Kody and Robyn allegedly began to change their tune about the college fund. Family conversations about the fund's performance started to become vague and pessimistic. Kody, with Robyn often by his side, would cite a bad market and low returns. They painted a picture of a fund that was struggling, a victim of economic forces beyond their control. They would express disappointment, assuring the other wives that they were monitoring it closely, but that the growth just wasn't what they had hoped for. According to sources, this was a carefully crafted lie. The fund wasn't underperforming, it was being systematically bled dry. In reality, Kody and Robyn were allegedly making consistent, large withdrawals. To conceal their activities, they justified these withdrawals as educational expenses for their own children, Dayton, Aurora, and Brianna. The term educational expenses was used as a broad and deceptive umbrella to cover a breathtaking array of personal luxuries. The deception was audacious in its scope. For example, when Dayton needed a new computer for his college classes, Kody authorized a significant withdrawal from the fund. He presented it to the family as a necessary purchase for Dayton's advanced tech setup. Janelle and Christine, trusting their husband, would have accepted this explanation. After all, Dayton's education was important. But what was the advanced tech setup? An insider alleges it was a high-end, custom-built gaming computer, complete with multiple monitors, a state-of-the-art graphics card, and a luxury gaming chair. A setup designed more for virtual warfare than for writing term papers. The cost was astronomical, far beyond what any of the other children would have received for a simple college laptop. This pattern of deceit allegedly repeated itself over and over. One of the most flagrant examples, and a key piece of the smoking gun evidence, involves the purchase of brand new cars for both Dayton and Aurora. These weren't sensible used cars to get to and from campus. These were new vehicles presented as gifts to celebrate their academic achievements. To fund these purchases, Kody and Robyn allegedly made two separate, massive withdrawals from the college fund, each in the tens of thousands of dollars. They justified these as essential for the children's transportation needs for school. They argued that Flagstaff was a spread-out city and that reliable transportation was a necessity for their success. The other wives, whose own children had to work and save for their own used cars, were none the wiser. They believed these cars were perhaps purchased through some other means, never suspecting that the money was being siphoned directly from the fund that was supposed to guarantee their own children's futures. But the deception didn't stop at material possessions. Kody and Robyn also used the fund to finance a lifestyle that was increasingly separate and more luxurious than the rest of the families. They began taking lavish family vacations that only included their own children. These trips, often to places like Las Vegas and California, were disguised as college tours. Kody would argue that they were exploring educational opportunities for the kids, visiting potential universities, and getting a feel for different campuses. But social media posts from the time, shared on private accounts but seen by a trusted few, told a very different story. The pictures weren't of lecture halls and libraries. They were of five-star hotels, expensive restaurants, shopping sprees on Rodeo Drive, and VIP treatment at theme parks. A withdrawal of over $25,000 from the college fund, meticulously dated in the financial records, directly corresponds with a luxury trip to Las Vegas. This trip, which included only Kody, Robyn, and their 5 children, was presented to the wider family as a critical research trip for Aurora's potential college choices. In reality, it was a week of indulgence, paid for by the collective family savings. This systematic plundering went on for years. Every time Janelle or Christine would inquire about the fund's balance, they were met with the same rehearsed lines about market volatility and disappointing returns. Kody and Robyn became masters of deflection, expressing shared frustration while secretly pocketing the money. They created a narrative of shared financial struggle, all the while living a life of increasing comfort and privilege. They were not just favoring their own children, they were actively financing their own desires on the backs of the other wives and their children. The trust that Janelle and Christine had placed in Kody, the trust that was the very glue of their plural family, was being eroded with every secret withdrawal, every deceptive explanation, every lavish purchase disguised as an educational expense. The stage was being set for a discovery so shocking, so profoundly treacherous, that it would ultimately shatter the illusion of one family forever. The reckoning was coming, and it would be delivered through the quiet determination of one woman who simply wanted what was promised for her child. The moment of discovery, the point where the carefully constructed wall of lies began to crumble, arrived not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet, routine administrative task. It was triggered by a milestone in the life of Janelle's youngest daughter, Savannah. For years, Janelle had diligently contributed to the education fund, holding on to the promise that when the time came, the money would be there to give her children a strong start in their adult lives. Savannah, a bright and reserved young woman, had worked hard through high school, and her efforts paid off when she was accepted into East Carolina University. It was a proud moment for Janelle, a culmination of years of support and sacrifice. With the acceptance letter in hand, Janelle initiated what she believed would be a simple process, accessing Savannah's portion of the college fund. She contacted the financial manager who handled the family's joint account, a professional Kody had insisted upon using for years. Her request was straightforward. She needed to understand the process for withdrawing funds for Savannah's upcoming tuition, housing deposits, and other initial college expenses. She expected a conversation about logistics, about tax implications, about the best way to transfer the money. Instead, she was met with a confusing and deeply unsettling response. The financial manager seemed hesitant, speaking in vague terms about the account's performance. He mentioned the market downturns that Kody had been citing for years. Janelle, ever the pragmatist, pressed for specifics. She wasn't calling for an economic forecast. She was calling to access funds that she had personally contributed to. "I understand the market has been tough," she likely said. "But what is the current balance? What is Savannah's portion valued at right now?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, then the bombshell. The manager informed her in the sterile, emotionless language of finance that the fund had been almost entirely depleted. The balance was nearly zero. For a moment, Janelle was stunned into silence. It didn't make sense. How could it be zero? Even with a bad market, the principal contributions from her, Christine, and Mary over nearly 2 decades should have amounted to a substantial sum. Her mind raced, trying to compute the information. Has there been a catastrophic investment loss, a colossal management error? She couldn't fathom how years of consistent saving could simply vanish. Her initial shock quickly hardened into a steely resolve. Janelle Brown is not a woman prone to hysterics. Her strength lies in her calm, analytical approach to problems. Something was terribly wrong, and she was going to get to the bottom of it. Alarmed and deeply suspicious, she made a formal request to the fund manager. She wanted a full, itemized withdrawal history for the entire life of the account. She wanted to see every transaction, every date, every amount, and every authorization. The manager, legally obligated to comply with a request from one of the account holders, agreed, though his reluctance was palpable. He promised to compile the documents and send them over. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and dread for Janelle. A cold knot of fear had formed in her stomach. She held onto a sliver of hope that there was a logical, albeit painful, explanation, a terrible investment that Kody had hidden to avoid worrying them. But in her heart, she knew something more sinister was at play. She had seen the growing disparity in the family, the way resources always seemed to flow in one direction, towards Robyn's house. She had heard Kody's increasingly flimsy excuses, and a pattern of behavior was starting to come into sharp, terrifying focus. When the thick manila envelope containing the financial statements finally arrived, Janelle sat down at her kitchen table and took a deep breath. With trembling hands, she opened it. What she found inside was not a story of a failed investment. It was a roadmap of deceit, a meticulously documented history of betrayal that stretched back for years. Page after page, she saw a steady bleed, a death by 1,000 cuts. The documents were the smoking gun. They laid bare the entire scheme in cold, hard numbers. As Janelle scanned the columns of dates and figures, her blood ran cold. The withdrawal history was a diary of Kody and Robyn's secret life, a ledger of their lies. The vague excuses and justifications they had offered over the years were now stripped bare, exposed by the undeniable truth of the bank records. Each line item was a fresh stab of betrayal, but some stood out with sickening clarity, connecting directly to events she remembered, events that had been presented to the family under false pretenses. The first charge that leaped off the page was a massive $40,000 withdrawal. The date was seared into Janelle's memory. It was the exact same week that Robyn had posted a series of beaming photos on her private social media account, celebrating her daughter Aurora's brand new car. At the time, Janelle had assumed Robyn had bought it with her own money, perhaps from her earnings from the show or her now-defunct jewelry business, My Sister Wife's Closet. She remembered feeling a pang of inequity, wondering how her own kids had to save up for years to buy beat-up second-hand vehicles while Robyn's children were gifted new ones. But she had pushed the feeling down, chalking it up to the complex and often unfair dynamics of the family. Now, seeing the transaction in black and white, the truth was horrifically clear. It wasn't Robyn's money, it was her money, it was Christine's money, it was the family's money, it was Savannah's future. They had taken a sum that could have covered a full year of tuition and board for one of the other children, and spent it on a luxury item for their own. The social media post, once a source of mild envy, was now transformed into a grotesque trophy of their theft. Another transaction, this one for $25,000, matched perfectly with the dates of a family vacation to Las Vegas. Janelle remembered this trip well because it had been a point of contention. Kody and Robyn had taken only their children, claiming it was an essential college tour for Dayton and Aurora. They had sold it as a research trip, a necessary educational expense. Janelle and Christine's kids were not invited. The excuse was that it was focused, a trip specifically for Robyn's kids and their unique needs. The other children, who would have loved a vacation, were told to wait, that their turn would come. It never did. The withdrawal history proved that this trip was no mere educational jaunt. The amount was far too large for a simple campus visit. It was the budget for a week of high-roller indulgence, shows, fine dining, shopping, and entertainment, all funded by the college fund. The college tour was a lie, a cover story to allow them to enjoy a private luxury vacation at the expense of the very children they were excluding. The evidence kept mounting with every page Janelle turned. There were thousands of dollars in withdrawals that corresponded with lavish shopping sprees, disguised as buying school supplies and dorm room essentials for Dayton and Aurora. But the amounts were astronomical, far exceeding what any normal college student would need. There were charges from high-end electronics stores, designer clothing boutiques, and expensive home furnishing retailers. The misappropriated funds totaled well over $150,000. But the ultimate proof, the single piece of evidence that removed any lingering doubt and exposed the raw, unvarnished intent behind the deception, was not a number on a spreadsheet. It was an email. Attached to the financial records was a piece of correspondence between Kody and the fund manager. In it, Kody was authorizing a specific sizable withdrawal. His written justification, the reason he provided to the financial professional for the release of the funds, was stated plainly. This is for Dayton's advanced tech setup. Janelle knew exactly what that meant. She had been in Kody and Robyn's home. She had seen Dayton's room. She knew about the tech setup. It was the high-end gaming system, a source of pride for Kody, who boasted about providing the best for his son. It had nothing to do with education and everything to do with recreation and entertainment. This email was the smoking gun in its purest form. It was Kody, in his own words, authorizing the use of the education fund for a frivolous luxury expense and lying about its purpose. He wasn't just taking the money, he was actively creating a false narrative to do so. He was looking a financial professional in the eye and spying, just as he had been looking his wives in the eye and lying for years. For Janelle, sitting alone at her kitchen table, the world tilted on its axis. This was not a misunderstanding. It was not a series of poor financial decisions. It was a calculated long-term campaign of theft perpetrated by her husband and her sister-wife. The betrayal was absolute. Kody and Robyn didn't just favor their own children, they had actively stolen from the others. They had looked Janelle and Christine's children in the eye, spoken to them about the importance of college, and all the while, they were raiding the very fund meant to make those dreams a reality. They had sacrificed the futures of 12 children for the sake of frivolous luxuries, brand new cars, and private vacations. The promise of one family was a lie. And Janelle now held the damning, irrefutable proof in her hands. The quiet, analytical woman had found the bottom line, and it was a declaration of war. The reckoning was not a singular, explosive event. It was a slow, agonizing dawn. For days, Janelle lived with the sickening weight of her discovery, the stack of financial statements sitting on her table like a monument to her shattered life. Every time she looked at them, the betrayal felt fresh, a physical blow to the chest. This wasn't just about money, it was about trust. It was about the 18 years she had poured into this family, the sacrifices she had made, the belief she had clung to that they were all in it together. That belief was now in ashes. She realized she couldn't carry this burden alone. There was only one person who would understand the depth of this particular wound. One person who had been standing alongside her in the trenches of Kody's growing neglect. Christine. She called her, her voice low and urgent, and asked her to come over. No kids, no Kody, just them. When Christine arrived, she found Janelle sitting at her kitchen table, the damning papers spread out before her like the aftermath of a storm. The look on Janelle's face was one Christine had never seen before. Not sadness, not anger, but a chilling emptiness. Without a word, Janelle simply pushed the statements across the table. Christine began to read. She was silent for a long time, her eyes scanning the columns of dates and figures. Janelle watched her, saw the flicker of confusion in her eyes turn to dawning horror, and then, finally, settled into a look of profound, soul-crushing validation. The color drained from Christine's face. Her hands began to shake. But she didn't cry, not at first. Instead, a single, bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Of course," she whispered, looking up at Janelle, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Of course they did. For Christine, this was the final piece of the puzzle. It was the confirmation of every suspicion she had harbored for a decade. It was proof that she wasn't crazy, that her feelings of being marginalized, of being the basement wife, were not just paranoia. Her children hadn't just been emotionally sidelined, they had been actively defrauded by their own father. Every time she had struggled to make ends meet, every time she had felt guilty for buying her kids a small treat, Kody and Robyn were living a life of luxury on her children's future. The memory of Isabel's surgery, the fight to get Kody to travel, the desperate need for funds which forced her to fundraise from her fans, all of it came rushing back, now cast in a sickening new light. They had told her there was no money, that the family was stretched thin. Yet here, in black and white, was the evidence of tens of thousands of dollars being spent on cars and vacations for Robyn's kids. The betrayal was so profound, so monstrous, it was almost impossible to comprehend. Together, the two women went through every line item, every withdrawal. They pieced together the timeline of deceit, matching the financial data with their own memories of events. They were no longer just sister wives. They were co-conspirators in the truth, united by a shared devastating wound. They knew they couldn't let this lie. This wasn't something that could be swept under the rug. This was a crime against their children. They decided they had to confront Kody and Robyn, but they knew they couldn't do it alone. A private conversation would be useless. Kody would rage, deflect, and gaslight them. Robyn would cry and play the victim. They would twist the story, deny the evidence, and turn it back on them, accusing them of being jealous and divisive. No, the truth had to be brought into the light. It had to be done in front of the entire family, especially the older children who were the direct victims of the theft. They needed witnesses. They needed a jury. Janelle, summoning a strength she didn't know she possessed, called for a full family meeting. She was deliberately vague about the agenda, simply stating that it was a matter of extreme financial importance that required everyone's presence. Kody, likely assuming it was another tedious debate about the Coyote Pass property lots, agreed. The stage was set for the ultimate showdown, to be held fittingly in the great room of Robyn's million-dollar house, a palace built on a foundation of lies. The atmosphere at the family meeting was thick with a tense, unknowable energy. The older kids were there: Logan, Aspen, Mykelti, Hunter, Peden, Garrison, Dayton, Aurora, along with Mary, Kody, Robyn, Janelle, and Christine. Kody started the meeting in his usual blustering way, ready to take control, but Janelle cut him off. Her voice was steady, devoid of emotion, which in itself was more alarming than any shout. "We are not here to talk about Coyote Pass," she said, her eyes sweeping across the room before landing on Kody. "We are here to talk about the Children's Education Fund." Cody's expression tightened. Robyn shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, a flicker of anxiety in her eyes. "What about it?" Kody asked, his tone already defensive. "Janelle went to access Savannah's portion of the funds for her college acceptance," Christine said, her voice trembling slightly but full of resolve. "And she discovered that there is nothing left." A confused silence fell over the room. The older kids exchanged puzzled glances. Nothing left? How was that possible? "Now, Kody," Mary began, ever the peacemaker, "I'm sure there's a simple explanation." "Yes, there is," Janelle said, her voice like ice. She opened a folder and pulled out the first statement. "The simple explanation is that over the last several years, more than $150,000 has been withdrawn from this account by Kody and Robyn." The accusation hung in the air, a physical thing. Kody leaped to his feet, his face turning a blotchy red. "Now you listen here," he bellowed, pointing a finger at Janelle. "That is a disgusting accusation. Every penny from that account was used for the children, for their needs." "Was Aurora's brand new car a need?" Janelle asked, her voice never rising. She slid a bank statement across the coffee table, alongside a printed screenshot from Robyn's social media, showing a beaming Aurora next to her new vehicle. "This $40,000 withdrawal is dated the same day you posted this photo, Robyn. Did you buy this car with the money that was supposed to send Peden to trade school? Or Garrison to university?" Robyn gasped, her hand flying to her chest as if she'd been struck. Tears instantly welled in her eyes. "How could you?" she sobbed, looking at Kody for protection. "We did that for her. She needed a safe, reliable car for school. You're twisting it to make it sound ugly." "What's ugly is stealing from your own family," Peden muttered from the corner, his face a mask of fury. "You have no idea what you're talking about," Kody roared, turning on his son. "I am the head of this family. I make the financial decisions. It is my money, and I will allocate it as I see fit to provide for my children." "Your children," Garrison shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or Robyn's children, because it seems like the 12 of us over here didn't get the new car memo. I worked 2 jobs through high school to buy my clunker. Did you forget that, Dad?" The room was electric with tension. The kids were no longer passive observers. They were the prosecution. Christine then spoke up, her voice thick with emotion as she held up another statement. "What about this?" she asked, her eyes locked on Kody. $25,000. The same week you and Robyn took your kids on a college tour to Vegas. Was that for their education, Kody? Or was it for the fancy hotels and the shopping sprees you posted about? While my daughter Isabel was in agonizing pain, needing back surgery, you were in Vegas, spending the money that could have helped her on a vacation for your real family. The mention of Isabel's surgery was a gut punch. It was a moment of peak hypocrisy and neglect that everyone in the room remembered. The air crackled with the children's collective anger and disillusionment. Aspen, always the most diplomatic, looked at her father with tears in her eyes. "Dad, just explain it," she pleaded. "There has to be a reason. Just tell us the truth." But Kody had no truth to offer, only rage and deflection. "The truth is, I have provided for every single one of you. The truth is, this is a mutiny. This is Janelle and Christine turning my own children against me because they are bitter and jealous of my relationship with Robyn." He was spiraling, turning to his classic narcissistic defense. He was the victim. He was the one being attacked, betrayed, and misunderstood. It was then that Janelle played her final irrefutable card. She calmly pulled the single email from the folder and placed it on the table. "This is an email you sent to the fund manager, Kody," she said, her voice clear and precise. "In it, you authorize a withdrawal. Please read aloud the justification you gave for needing the money." Kody stared at the paper, his face ashen. He knew what it said. Robyn looked at it, and a fresh wave of performative sobs racked her body. "Read it, Dad," Hunter urged, his voice cold. Kody remained silent, his jaw clenched. Janelle picked up the paper. "This is for Dayton's advanced tech setup," she read to the silent room. She then looked directly at Dayton. "Dayton, with all due respect, your tech setup is a top-of-the-line gaming computer. I've seen it. We've all seen it. How exactly is that a shared educational expense for all 18 children?" The silence that followed was deafening. The lie was exposed, in Kody's own words. There was no explanation, no justification, no way to spin it. It was the smoking gun, and it had just been fired in the middle of the family. Kody exploded. It was a torrent of narcissistic rage, a volcanic eruption of fury and blame. He accused Janelle and Christine of espionage, of trying to destroy the family. He screamed at his sons for their disrespect, calling them ungrateful. He declared that he was the patriarch, the king of his castle, and they would all submit to his will. It wasn't a defense. It was the desperate roar of a tyrant whose crown had just been knocked from his head. The meeting dissolved into chaos. The children were yelling, demanding answers. Robyn was crying hysterically, clinging to Kody and claiming they were being persecuted. Mary was trying to weakly call for calm, but her words were lost in the storm. Janelle and Christine just sat there, watching the empire crumble. They had brought the truth to light, and the light was burning everything to the ground. That night, the Brown family as they knew it, as they had presented it to the world for years, died. It was not a sudden death, but the final rattling breath of a body that had been riddled with the cancer of favoritism and deceit for over a decade. The confrontation was not a moment of healing or resolution. It was an amputation. It severed the family into two distinct, irreconcilable parts: Kody, Robyn, and their children on one side, and the original 13 children and their mothers on the other. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too grievous to ever be repaired. For Christine, this was the final, undeniable sign that her marriage was not just broken, but had been a sham. The spiritual covenant was meaningless if it wasn't backed by trust and honor. Kody hadn't just failed to love her, he had actively harmed her children. He had stolen their birthright. Her decision to leave, which had been percolating for years, now became an absolute moral necessity. She had to save her children and herself from this toxic, fraudulent family unit. She began to quietly make her plans, no longer weighed down by guilt, but propelled by the righteous fury of a mother bear protecting her cubs. For Janelle, the pragmatist, the business partnership was officially dissolved. The contract had been breached in the most egregious way possible. Her loyalty to Kody, which had been wavering for years, was now completely extinguished. She saw him not as her husband or spiritual partner, but as a failed leader, and worse, a con man. While she would take longer to physically leave, this was the moment of her emotional departure. She began to disentangle her finances, secure her independence, and focus solely on her own children. She was no longer building a collective kingdom. She was building a lifeboat for her and her kids. The fallout with the children was even more catastrophic. The sons, Garrison, Gabriel, Hunter, Peyton, were radicalized by this betrayal. Their father had not just been neglectful, he had been a thief. Their simmering resentment towards him and Robyn hardened into a permanent estrangement. They saw the full picture with devastating clarity. Their father had traded them and their futures for a new family, a new life, and a new car for Aurora. The reverence and respect they once had for him was gone, replaced by contempt and pity. Their subsequent on-screen fights with Kody, his accusations that they didn't respect him, all stem from this alleged moment of ultimate disrespect. A father stealing from his own sons? This explosive theory of the stolen college fund is the missing piece of the sister wives puzzle. It is the original sin that explains everything that came after. It reframes the entire narrative not as the slow decay of a plural family, but as a calculated long-term heist. It wasn't polygamy that failed the Brown family. It was greed and a profound lack of character. According to these insider reports, Kody and Robyn didn't just break the family's hearts. They robbed them. They took the tangible symbol of their collective hope, the promise of a better future for all the children, and they cashed it out to fund their own selfish desires. The great family patriarch, the man who preached unity and sacrifice, was allegedly nothing more than a grifter, and his tender-hearted favorite wife, his willing accomplice. The fractures, the bitterness, the estrangement we see playing out on our screens today are not the result of arguments over COVID protocols or property lines. They are the aftershocks of a seismic betrayal, a devastating financial crime that proved to Christine and Janelle and to their children that they were never ever truly part of Kody's one family. They were just the investors in a Ponzi scheme of affection, and their children's dreams were the price of admission to Kody and Robyn's exclusive, lavish life.